3, 2, 1. Again, without the clapper, but we are live. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People live stream, where I talk to senior designers from all over the world and where you literally get to ask them anything. So get your typing fingers ready, and I'll weave the conversation. I'll weave your questions into the conversation as we go. And to warm up the chat, let me know where you're actually tuning in from. Test my flag knowledge, drop a city, drop a country. Would love to know who's actually out there listening to us waffle on this live stream. It always surprises me where everybody else is coming from. So that's pretty cool. But without further ado, let's start the show. This is the Design of Everyday People.
It sound right, boy.
Before we get started, I want to tell you about today's sponsor. Don't know if you noticed, but there's a big shift in our industry. The process of us doing our work design is changing, and it's faster than any of us out there expected. Our output as designers are beyond the old typical user journeys, wireframes, mock-ups. The reality is that we're expected to do more with less, especially with the tools that we have available now. Designers are expected to show multiple ways to solve a specific problem, show how systems actually work with edge cases, show higher fidelity outside the old clickable prototypes on Figma. And again, with less resources. So the question is, how do we do that? So I've partnered with Dazzle for this live stream. Dazzle is designed to fit into your core product workflow. You can design and build your prototypes that's actually in real code. So you can send a link to anyone and just start sharing your ideas. Inspection tools to see the code, the structure, and the logic. So the PM and designers can understand what the AI created, and it helps the project better. Think inspect tool on the web, but cleaner. Then you can edit on the canvas, things that we love to do, instead of looking at this scary terminal. If you're familiar with vibe coding, the cool thing is you can actually build your components once, and Dazzle will auto update everywhere else on the project. Good for those working with complex design systems. Most designers use a bunch of different tools for ideating, prototyping, and testing. With Dazzle, your product team can work together from ideation to validating, all in one platform. It's as simple as literally dropping a screenshot and to get started. I will show you more of this stuff later on. I have a video coming out about it. But if you want to try Dazzle, you can scan that QR code in the top left, and I'll leave that throughout this stream. Or you can head to dazzle.dev to try it. I've been testing it out, and it's pretty cool. And I want to be clear that Dazzle is not another vibe coding tool. It's actually a workspace designed for product teams to design and build real prototypes to help validate their ideas. Enough of that. Let's get back to the show, and let's actually see who has come in. Eric, where is this flag? I don't know, but maybe our guest knows. Oh, okay. Is it Finland? No, it's not Finland. It's okay. I give up, but I'm sure our guest probably knows. Okay, cool. So welcome to this show. It's how to build a personal OS with AI. Personal OS meaning personal operating system. I'll start with introductions like always. I'm the founder, Chris from UX Playbook. But before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get in UX. Now I spend most of my time helping designers navigate a fuzzy career with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's enough about me. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Rumsey. Ryan is the founder of CDO School, so Chief Design Officer School, the author of Business Thinking for Designers, and works one-on-one with senior design leaders on how to be strategic at work. So let's get Ryan out and find out how he's doing, and if he knows that flag. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And that flag is Norway.
I knew. Oh God, I suck. I've just embarrassed myself through online, but that's what happens with live shows. So thanks for that doing that. Yeah.
It's
So
what
Ryan,
makes
for the
it
folks that
fun, right?
yeah, exactly. So for the folks that don't know you, Ryan, tell us about yourself and what you're up to these days.
About myself, I'm a dad. I am a big Liverpool fan. I live in rural Vermont, and right now it's maple syrup season, so a lot of maple syrup is coming into our lives. And career-wise, I work for myself. I've been working for myself for about 7 years now, running CDO School amongst other things. But prior to that, spent a lot of time designing software and then building teams. Worked at places like Apple and Electronic Arts and USAA, which is a bank here in the US. Yeah, but I would say mostly day to day, it's probably parenting that takes up most of my energy and time.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, before we get into our conversation about building a personal OS with AI, just want to remind the audience that these streams are recorded. You can head to YouTube and just search my name or search Chris from UX Playbook, because people always ask, are these recorded if they need to drop off early or whatever? Okay, so let's get into it and I'll introduce the topic for us today. So most designers think AI is coming for their jobs. Actually, I think AI is coming for the execution part of their jobs, which means your value shifts from your judgment um, to your frameworks, your way of thinking. But the problem is, it's kind of all stuck in our heads, and that's why I wanted to bring you on, Ryan, because you're gonna kind of walk us through how you kind of built this personal AI, personal
Mm,
operating system with AI. So hopefully, it shows us how we can do it too. And the three things we want to touch on today is the context layer, how to codify your expertise, and how to build AI agents with your judgment. And for those folks who are thinking about this but don't know where to start, again, drop your comments in the stream so we can actually address some of those towards the tail end of the show. But let's talk about the first thing. Let's get right into it. And what do you mean when you say personal operating system? Like, what does that mean? Let's
yeah.
start a level set here.
Well, it's a catchy phrase, right? But pragmatically, what does it mean? I think many designers or many of those that I work with uh, are, say, at this point in their career where I would say they're like the expert amateur. They know how to do things. They have a lot of experience. They built up a lot of, say, muscle memory, and they have their own patterns of what ends up being called their judgment. They're experts in that, but then they are amateurs at explaining that to other people, even
Mm,
themselves, because it's all sort of in their head, and their brain is operating at nanoseconds, if you will, if not faster, to process and take in information and assess and all these types of things that um, they end up, especially if they are mentoring or leading other people in situations where they find, and this is certainly the case, it has been with me as well, I think I'm giving guidance, but I'm actually just giving advice. And so what's the difference is that uh, we might tell somebody, I think you need to be more strategic. But that's just advice. There's nothing that anybody can actually do. There's no progress they can make. They can't understand if they are or not. I think that's the case for many of us. If we progressed in our career, we get into a new space with new partners and new stakeholders, and we're asking them, can you just give me something pragmatic or something that I can evaluate if I'm moving in a right direction or not? And generally speaking, they can't either. And so where this comes into the picture with AI or large language models, machine learning, these types of things, is these models, right, they're prediction machines, and they're going to predict no matter what. And if you don't understand yourself explicitly what is good or what is bad, and you're asking these models to somehow come up with something for you, you're just going to be in this circle of frustration. So an example might be, hey, AI, I really need a vision for this work that I need to do. But if you yourself have not taken the time to codify, how do I know when a vision is good or bad? These models will never be able to sort of produce that. And so this personal OS thing is really this weird journey that I've been on even before large language models popped up, which is all rooted in mentorship. I had somebody on my team 10, 11 years ago who, you know, I hired because they were brilliant. And I was like, this is going to be a wonderful leader. They are fantastic. And so right away, I was bringing them into meetings with the executives. And that person said something to me that really made me realize I wasn't being very good at articulating what I mean, even to the people on my team, even to myself. And what they said was, I understood everything in that meeting. I knew what you all were talking about, but I don't know how I go from where I am in my career today to where you are. And that's why I came to work with you. And so is it that moment that suddenly I realized, you know, oh, we look at our job skill frameworks and the frameworks to go from, say, senior to lead to principal to manager. They have these generic, you know, rubrics, if you will, of like, be a good communicator, you know, be a great partner, think more strategically. And yet there's no way to evaluate, there's no criteria attached to that tells us whether that is working or not. And so I, in my own weird brain, began to sort of say, I have to codify that. I have to see if I can't pick apart these real world situations or experiences that I've been in and see if I could be more explicit with how my judgment works, how I evaluate. And the reason that's important is AI models need that. They're never going to be able to guess. Why do they work well with code? Well, code is quite structured in passing or failing a test, is quite structured in knowing what is proper, you know, formatting or not proper formatting. And when it comes to our own knowledge, this idea of creating a personal OS is really about being able to explain and say what you mean. A very tangible example.
Ryan, I've lost you. Oh, and you're back.
Lost me. I'm back.
You're back.
Such as
Sorry.
live streams, right? Yeah,
Such as live stream, exactly.
Yeah.
So I
I don't
caught
know
up
where I left
to
off.
I caught up to tangible
Mhm.
something. I think I cut
Right.
it cut
So
off.
a tangible concept here is, have you ever had somebody say, hey, Chris, you know, it's really important you be able to read the room. You
Mhm.
should be able to, when in a room with your peers, be able to judge and evaluate what the right move is.
Yep.
And, you know, that makes sense. Sounds like good. But can you do anything with that? Like,
Not really.
do you know when it's good, like when you're doing it or not? And so that's this example of, well, that sounds like good advice, but I can't do anything with it. And so if what I find is a lot of people go to AI and they might ask a question like, I need help reading the room. but they themselves have not yet been able to explain when I'm doing a good job of reading the room or not. And so codifying that comes down, for me, what I've learned over the years is I'm really looking for one thing first. Is the person across the room from me, do they appear to be calm? Do they appear to be curious? Do they feel like they're connected with me in that moment? If so, they are in a place to receive, say, my more analytical recommendation, my data-backed logic. They're in a place where they're able to hear that. But if they are, say, testy, or they are showing up in a way where you can tell they're very tense, well, I've learned that they will never be able to hear my logic in that moment because they are in a place of kind of chaos themselves. And we think about that when we are in, anxious moments. Are we able to hear logic? No, we're in our own heads. And so that's an example of me going, I've had to codify that reading the room is first an evaluation of how I observe somebody else showing up. And if they show up in that curious way, I can give a strong analytical argument. Barbara Minto's pyramid principle is a perfect example. But if they're showing up, tense and filled with anxiety or frustration, I have learned that in that moment, the appropriate approach is to coach them, even if they're higher up. Use a coaching method where I simply want to validate them. Where I want to say, I want to make sure I've got you. Is this what you said? And if they say yes, I say, well, that makes sense. I know that's important to you. And so that idea here is why codifying is super important is if I'm going to start agents that help me do repetitive work, or build agents to help others do similar repetitive work, well, the model has to kind of understand and know, how do you evaluate if somebody's doing this? If so, try this method. And that's the difference. Guidance is really me giving some suggested avenues of action. They might not work, but now the accountability is on me to give good guidance. Whereas if it's advice and I tell you to read the room, well, now I've passed all the accountability on to you, and I'm here. And I think back to the importance of LLMs, they're math models. They just do much better when there are clear rules of logic that they can work with. And if not, they're going to make it up. And they're going to make it up on probably the things that aren't working currently already.
I mean, I do want to get into it does. I do want to get into like the specifics of how you manage to codify your own expertise. But someone just said that LinkedIn Live is a crash fest. Okay, so here I would suggest that you go to YouTube, just type my name. There is a link in the description of the event, so you can switch to YouTube. YouTube is usually more stable, as LinkedIn has all kinds of problems from the folks that use it all the time. YouTube is much better for this kind of thing. So please head to YouTube. Just a announcement there. Okay, so how did you go about sort of like thinking about codifying your expertise and then like actually doing it? Or like what did you have to go through this long back and forth with AI, or did you have a strategy going into it? Like, these are the things that I think are important, and then now this is how I think about it, and then sort of feed the model. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah. So I should preface that I was doing this long before AI and models came around. So this is me and my weird brain, is I simply wanted to get better as a leader and as a mentor with the thing that I think frustrated me most about my career, which is moving into a new role and expecting the same type of mentorship and guidance that I got, say, when I was designer. As soon as I moved into management, I was like, oh, I'm going to get that same type of mentorship. No, it's gone. Nobody's mentoring you anymore. And so that was really frustrating. I was like, how am I supposed to get better? How am I supposed to progress if I'm completely on my own? And, for anybody who's had a career that, say, as soon as you get into like lead or principal level, you're kind of on your own, and it's really frustrating. It's filled with stress and anxiety because you have nothing to, like, there's no flag in the ground. There's no marker for you to say that's an example. You're really just guessing. And who wants to go through 10 years of guessing before you kind of figure it out? And so this was me back in the day, starting to see if I could get better at this. And what I began to observe is that I had initially looked to specific skills or methods as the answer. I want to learn this method because I think it will help me do this. I want to learn this skill because I think it will help me do this. But that didn't really work, because what was happening and what I began to figure out is I keep finding myself in the same situation. I keep finding myself in a meeting where people are treating me this way. I keep finding myself in a situation where the budget has been cut. I keep finding myself in a situation where a reorg has happened. And none of these skills were like directly helping me address those situations. So when I began to codify, rather than thinking I need to learn this skill, I began to think more of, oh, what are these situations that are common? Have I faced them before? If yes, how did I fix them before? Great, here's now a, say, technique or approach that I used to fix it. And that approach could be anywhere from I made a Gantt chart to I had coffee with somebody. And so this was me kind of taking a whole new approach. And so when I would talk to folks on my team or others, rather than saying, I think you need to learn this skill, you don't need to get better at communicating. Like, don't take a class on communication. Rather, tell me about the situations that come up where you feel like you're not communicating well. Okay, what happens in those situations? Has there ever been a time where you did feel like you communicated well? What did you do in that circumstance? And so this codification sort of exercise that I was doing for myself sort of flips the idea that, oh, really, judgment, these things that we learn, they're not based around a skill. They're based around our ability to navigate situations. And so because I had this, and that's, I've been teaching this for a long time, that became sort of this natural path when models came around, and when everybody started asking Claude to give them an answer, give me a strategy, and feeling very frustrated. It's no different than asking a senior executive, give me your strategy, and they're not giving you anything. I began to take this same approach and say, here's how I, here's the decision tree of what I use in these situations. And so when I began building my own skills and agents, it was all really around scenarios that were common, not skills. It was decision trees around that. And then just building logic. Now with Claude skills, we can just write this in Markdown of just saying, if this, if the user says something like this, go look at this Markdown file. If the user says something like that, here's this other Markdown file.
Right. So it was like this process of like introspection and how you sort of navigated it. And then in terms of actually feeding it into the model, it was just, did you have to have the model prompt you, or did you have just a library of stuff that you're just like, here it is, like
So
I've
I did a little
written
bit
it
of
down
both.
somewhere? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, did a little bit of both, because again, I'm like in this fortunate place where I've taught and I've built, like I have all these resources. So initially it was me taking transcripts, SRT files, and asking the model to analyze, review, tell me what you believe or see. What are you taking of this, working with the model? And then saying, okay, model, let's now put this, turn it into a Markdown file. I have plans to build a skill, around this. And so I wasn't, typing it all out myself, but I did have the previous resources, or, these decision logic trees. I had made lots of maps in FigJam, just tree structures over the years of my own logic. And so I would export that. That's one of the things that you can do, is you can highlight and copy and paste that. And I then would record for myself like a quick audio of me describing what was happening. And I would give the transcript of the audio and all the content that was in my FigJam board to the model, and I would be explicit. This is something I teach to others. I think there's room to build some skills, some agents that, in this case, I want to be my thinking partner. You're another version of me. In this case, I want it to be a copy of me that somebody else can use because I'm not always available. And so when I began building these, I was mostly thinking of like, what are the questions or what are the situations that people often come to me about? What are the things that generally require me in person to give an answer to? Can we bridge that gap? Can we take those, and can I make agents that essentially do a good enough job? They're rooted and based in my logic to, kind of help people in the moment, that they don't require to have 45 minutes of conversation with me.
Right. Um, then, you spoke about, feeding the model with all the stuff that you've done in the past, but how do you increase the sort of one-to-one mapping of your judgment and just the model being predictive of like the next word, for example, right? Or like the best
Yeah.
practices that they've read on the internet. Like what
Yeah.
what is this judgment layer, and how do you evaluate that? That's because that's really weird.
Okay. And maybe I'll ask you, how do
Okay.
you evaluate anything? I'm being rhetorical.
Okay.
You run tests. So the way I would do it is, or let's maybe talk about how I do it now, is I separate the acts of building the agent from testing the agent. So much like a software developer, you have like trunks and branches, so I would work with the agent in, say, one chat to help me build it out And now I have a structure, and I would open up a brand new chat, or now it's, co-work and code. But I would essentially say, we're going to start from new. I don't want you to have the memory of building because we're not in build mode anymore. We're going to actually run it as if I'm using it. And I would just type random stuff, see what happens. I would then create a log of what happened to the test. I would say, Claude, create a log of what our prompts and our conversations were doing, how we were communicating, and create a markdown file of that, because I'm going to take that markdown file and I'm going to go back to build mode. I'm going to share that and say, here's the log of what we were trying to do, and here's where I think we can improve. Here's where, if it were me, I would have responded in this way. Let's update the thing. And so it's just a series of Q&A and testing with myself, where I'm sort of acting as user. And are you still with me? Like that?
Yep. Still, sorry,
Yeah,
I
okay.
just had to clean up the chat, but I was definitely listening. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it's like taking the
Yeah.
actual process of making software, of testing and learning,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way. And I think that's a little bit different than how I see a lot of people approaching it. Is they end
Yep.
up having one giant chat. They get frustrated, and what we have to understand is, as soon as like the chat starts asking the same questions or starts breaking something that you've already fixed, okay, we could just say that that's a stable thing now, but now I need to start anew. Now I
Yep.
need to like break off of that branch and start a new branch. And so
Yep.
that's me just taking that same, and a lot of these lessons are from engineering and development of, if you have something good enough, now I want to run a test. Now I create a new branch rather than going back to the stuff that was stable. And you just do that back and forth, and eventually gets to something that, oh, that's not bad. And then throw it in front of others, see how it goes, right?
We're talking about agents. What agents? Oh, hey Ryan, there you're back. So we're talking about agents, and especially agent with judgment. What have you found to be extremely useful as an agent? Like, what agent are you like, okay, if I didn't have these ones that I've built, like my life would be 10 hours more on the laptop, for example. What ones are you, do you think is useful, and do you recommend other folks think about?
So there are obviously lots of folks making skills, right? So even
Yep.
Anthropic makes lots of skills. And what I would say is, they're useful starters, but as soon as you see how it's written, you're probably going to have your own take and say, like, that's not actually good enough. That's not here. So I think, there are plenty of things that say, like, produce a PowerPoint or produce a document. What I find more useful is thinking about the things that I do repeatedly that require my judgment, require sort of my learned knowledge, and that don't have a clear sort of tree structure around. Those are the things where I go, that usually takes up a lot of my energy. Usually means I have to meet with somebody personally. So one example is CDO School. I've created the toolkit, and I have multiple courses and whatnot. And what I would say is, like the instructor, the best thing you can do is go through these in a linear fashion and learn along the way. But I know nobody has that kind of time or energy, particularly right now. So what is a common request that I get? are people saying, hey, how do I talk to executives? And so creating then a skill that assumes that that's a question that comes in. And the skill is then me saying, so how would I do this in person? I would ask them to describe the situation. I would ask them to evaluate who their partners are. I would ask, are there any hard constraints? Like you have to have this done by Friday. Okay, go look at lesson number 4, module number 2, in this, in the strategic designer, and just watch this 6-minute video. It will have you covered. And so those are the things that I'm largely creating now. And I think for anybody who spends a significant amount of time trying to translate their judgment to others, that takes a lot of time and energy, and that's a great opportunity to turn it into skills. We have a lot of these agents that just make me a document, and that's fine. I'm particularly interested in going like, is the quality of the document good? Is the quality of the advice good? And so that's what usually is helping me save time, is creating things that usually require me talking to me for 30 to 45 minutes. Oh, if I can break that down, that helps them immediately. It's probably not as good as talking to me, but it helps them. And now that gives me back 30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, and it could run, 24/7, folks all around the world when you're asleep. It could address some of the issues, right? Like all the concerns or questions or anything like that. Okay. I mean, we had a chat before this, and we spoke about, or you spoke about the context layer where the value from designers now sort of pivots from execution to direction. Do you want to speak more about this topic and why do you see it going this way?
Yeah. I'm not going to jump on this sort of like execution as this giant big thing that everybody's sort of talking about. There's still lots of execution that needs to happen. It's just different. There's this sort of art that I've seen is kind of lost, which is, if you go to most product teams, in my experience at least, and you ask them like simple questions, tell me how this product works. What are, say, the 8 key behaviors or actions you need to see a customer doing that tells you this is working? Nobody can really explain that. Nobody can give that answer. And so when I say it's moving towards like creative direction, is the example I think of is in television, there's this role called a showrunner. The showrunner is not a product manager. The showrunner is not a designer. Showrunner is not like into one of these. The showrunner, their core job is to ensure that there's like this beginning and end of a story, and the beats of the story make sure that you get from one end to another. And so when it comes to creative direction or art direction, a lot of times when a model is spitting things out, you need somebody who can step back and say, actually, this doesn't fit in line with the story. And so products, like if you think about like Airbnb, is a perfect example. A lot of that story is captured maybe by a service design team. But it's not the story, but they're maybe the ones doing the work. But that's, essentially the story that service design would say. Well, what's the first thing is they have to create an account. They have to search. They have to book. They have to check in. They have to stay. They have to check out. They have to leave a review and maybe get a coupon. And so you'll see lots of journey maps or service blueprints that kind of explain that. But I think most of us who are doing that work want to talk about, oh, this is service design, rather than saying everybody on the product team should know these are the 8 core things that need to happen. So early on, we need them to create an account. There's a behavior that can be tracked and measured and whatnot. And so when I think of creative direction, it's moving more into what I think people want to do, this higher level sort of abstraction, and ensure that whatever these agents are doing, they are doing it in line with this bigger story. And I think somebody wrote, or there's a New York Times article, I don't really read the New York Times, but Anil Dash was quoted in it, and that's why I read it. But they were talking about, like, why is there this weird dichotomy right now of, say, creative people really frustrated with AI, where coders are quite happy with it. And the way they framed it, I think, was really interesting, which is to say, for creative people, AI seems to be the work that fills them with joy and love and humanity and leaves them with drudgery. Whereas for coders, there's not many people who code who actually like writing code. Instead, the AI takes the drudgery of writing code and allows them to be more of that creative director, that architect. And I think there's some lessons here that if we think more about these models as, oh, what's the drudgery part of my work that I can take away? That gives us more time to think about what's this story and this sort of throughput. And the drudgery part of a designer's work is probably meetings, having to communicate with others, like having to sell a story. To me, that's more of
Emails,
this drudgery.
yeah,
Like all this other stuff.
documenting decisions, like write-ups and all of that stuff. Yeah.
That's right. And then really ask, like, is your favorite part of the work working in Figma? Is your favorite part of the work, creating a FigJam board? If so, great. If you're going to be better at that than any other person, actually, I imagine you might not actually like the technical, I have to set up a FigJam board for a workshop. I don't like that. I like facilitating the workshop. So now these models, you can create an agent skill to sort of say, like, create this template based on this thing that I've done before so that I can get to the stuff that I like doing, which is facilitating a workshop.
Mm. In your experience, like, obviously different skills or different agents take a varied amount of work, but are you finding yourself spending more time on training the agent or testing it and sort of reevaluating it than you are actually doing the actual thing? Because imagine,
Yeah.
like, you could have just had that 30-minute conversation and it would have been like fine. You'd like fire the questions, but then you spent 3 days on this agent. But again, it's not perfect. So it's like, because I can imagine that being the pushback of a lot of people. Like, I could just do the thing. It's a lot quicker.
Well, let's talk about context, because
Mhm.
yes, I could have one 30-minute conversation, but how frequently do I have those 30-minute conversations? So
Mm.
back in the day when I would do user task analysis, old school, is I would look at tasks people have to do. What's the urgency of the task? How long does it take, the duration, but how often does it happen? And so, yes, in that moment, it probably doesn't make sense for me to take 3 days for what could be a 30-minute conversation. But if I'm having that 30-minute conversation every day, 240 days a year, the math starts to make sense. And by the way, when we create software, you know, particularly software, we're still doing testing and learning. We're still iterating. It's never done.
Mm-hmm.
There is no done, right? And so contextually, like if you're able to make something in 3 days that used to take 3 weeks, and every cycle takes 3 weeks, and now it takes 3 days every cycle, you know, like I think we have to think about these bigger sort of pictures, and that's been a, you know, a lesson for me over the years, because I think early on in my leadership career, I would just go like, I got to do it now,
Mm.
and not really be able to self-assess and say, why do I find myself doing the now every you know, every day, rather than going, oh wait, you know. I think early in my career, um, I wanted things to be fixed that I kind of had no control over fixing. What do I mean by that? They're not inviting me to the party. I have no ability, you know, directly to do that. And so in my head, rather than say the quiet part out loud, which is they're not inviting me to the party, I would keep going like, I'm going to do everything possible to keep getting them to invite me to the party, and not look at the actual data, which says they're still not inviting you to the party. And so in that case, kind of going back, a lot of my judgment over the years has been learning to just kind of observe the things happening to me as just things, and doing my own work to say like, that's not me, that's not my fault. But if I don't observe, you know, if I don't just say that that's not happening, I can't make a new choice. I can't try to solve it in a new way.
Mm.
And I think it's a lot of those skills translate over to working with agents, is treating it like tests. This test is not how I'm going how I want. I could either scream and yell and say, this is a terrible thing, or I can try to test it in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For the folks that don't have experience with sort of building agents and using the APIs from like Claude or OpenAI and stuff, what like have you found it to be a meaningful, you know, electricity bill for you, or have you found it to be like just it's fine, it's manageable? Like how are you
Yeah.
finding that part of it? Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not using any giant max plans, because I think,
Okay.
and this is a fairly recent event. I know how to use Terminal. I hate using Terminal. I hate it. And so my tolerance for doing something was always like how willing you know, I am to be stuck in Terminal. Anthropic released Cowork in January, and I think it's like this giant unlock for people who don't like using Terminal, are intimidated by using Terminal, never want to use Terminal. And by the way, where the most tokens are spent, where that's in producing code, that's in writing software, not in, say, knowledge conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you understand sort of some of the basic structures that are more recent, I think prior to this, we would talk about like, you have to build a RAG, or you have to build MCP, and that's all made for developers. That's all made for people who love being in Terminal. But with Cowork and Anthropic coming up with the skills, it's just a file folder with files, and they're markdown. And all the markdown is just basic instructions written in a way that both humans and the model can understand. And so now with Cowork, you don't have to spend giant tokens. You don't have to kind of do all this, because you're not building an app. You're just sort of saying, oh, you know, take this Word doc that I have, Here's an example of my 6-pager strategy template that works really well where I am. And let's make a markdown version of it, because I want to build a skill around helping me develop a strategy that eventually gets turned into a 6-pager in this format. And when it's marked down, you can import it back into Word, back into all these sort of things. And so that's where I'd say, like, right now, for those who aren't coders and hate being in terminal, like co-work and skills are now this complete unlock to sort of get back to that context layer of like helping you work out your own logic just in plain words, plain spoken or, you know, written words.
Sure.
Doesn't cost a lot either in terms of tokens.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I'm sure most folks, especially ones who are listening to this, probably have an account on one of your popular models. So just wondering, wanted to ask that. I guess, what would you say? Because just before we go, as we're kind of running out of time, what would you say if someone hasn't tried co-work and they're only sort of on the very basic of like just chatting to AI when they have a question and real simple queries, and not really built anything that's like rich in depth, for themselves, anything close to a personal OS? What would you say they need to do? How should they think about solving this problem for themselves? Like, any words of encouragement? Because I know a lot of folks out there probably hasn't touched the surface, so it'll be interesting
Yeah,
to sort of hear your thoughts. Yeah.
I would say a lot haven't either. I would say, like, there's a lot of noise around it, especially on social media or LinkedIn, or around what is capable. I would say, if you have made the choice to try to work with this, if you have ever found yourself asking the same question into a chat window multiple times, or struggling to go find that answer, exploring co-work is an interesting approach. And you can, I mentioned co-work because it's kind of the only product out there right now. I'm sure others will be coming out, but you can literally, put your question to Claude and say, I find myself asking this question all the time, and it's hard for me to go find that answer that I got 6 weeks ago. I don't even know the name of the chat. I'd like to work with co-work to help me create some type of system so that when this question comes up, I'm right here, and I'm essentially using skills and an agent. And I think everybody would be very surprised that you can ask meta questions like that. Claude, help me do a Claude. Like,
Yeah.
As the way in. If you give some just clarity of like, I hate having to do this repetitive thing. Can you help me do this thing? I think people would be surprised as a way to kind of get their feet wet.
Yeah. I haven't tried co-work yet, and honestly, how I manage it is just all projects. But even then, it's like super messy, and I'm like including things at different places, and I'm like, oh, what's going on? And then,
here's the big difference. Here's
yeah.
the big difference with chat and projects. You have to have already created materials and feed it into them. Co-work, what you're actually giving Claude permission to do is to have CRUD, create, write, update, delete, access to a single folder on your machine. So in terminal, it has access to everything. But with co-work, you just say, we're going to work in this folder. And so you could put your documents in there, but magically Claude will begin to actually create documents for you on your behalf. So you could be more like, you hire Claude as the consultant to make these documents for you, and you're just, you're the expert. And suddenly now you have a folder populated with documents. And so that's this big difference from, say, chat. And now all you have to do in Cowork is, if you have access to this, Claude knows everything in it. I don't have to continually repeat and, oh, I'm out of space for this project.
Yeah.
I have to add more document. No, in Cowork, if it's all in that folder, you don't have to go through all that token burning of adding and, and reviewing and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I would sort of say that big shift is in Cowork. You can kind of be more of the expert in the room, and you've hired Claude to make you things.
All right. Well, I'm convinced because I've thought about spending a week in Claude and cleaning up my project files and all this stuff, but I could just use Cowork and it would do it for me, because context is already there. It's just not structured properly. And obviously, Cowork will do that for me. So why am I doing the heavy lifting, right? That sounds like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, and just a little advice is always ask, tell me your plan first. Don't do anything. Tell me what you're going to do. Give me your plan. I want to review that plan.
Okay.
And then if you have files that you don't want it to do anything with, you have to let it know. Like, in this folder is read only.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll do what it wants to do, and maybe you don't want it to do that.
Okay. I need to read about stuff it can do and potential dangers, but I'm excited. I'm on the optimist side versus the pessimist side, so that's good. Okay. Well, before I let you go, Ryan, would love to give you some time to speak about what you have going on and the upcoming workshop you have, and I'll hide behind backstage and give you as much time as you want. So please go ahead and tell the folks what's going on with you coming up. Great.
Yeah, so I run CDO School. It's the CDO.school, and I have lots of stuff like courses and curriculum. Inside my toolkit, I run a small community, mostly of design leaders, called The Collective. But yesterday was the first edition of this Claude Cowork for designers. I ran the workshop, and if you go to claude.thecdo.school, I need to update the site, but I'll be running the workshop again probably in about 6 weeks, and would love to have you. It's a one-day workshop. We're literally making our first Claude skills and agents, and at the end of the day, you will walk away with this. So you don't have to do it all on your own. I'll be there with you to guide you through. So I'll update that site later today.
All right. So, guys, if you want to check out CDO School and join the workshop and sort of dive into how Ryan thinks about this and also what he's done over the years, even before the models came out, I think that would also be super insightful on how he thinks about it. So you can actually implement and start building your own. Yeah, really thank you, Ryan, for joining us today. It was awesome, and you've given me a ton of ideas of what I need to do and how I can kind of leverage co-work, and also just some pointers, some things that I should get it to confirm like what it's doing before actually doing it. Otherwise, it will run amok. So again, thank you so much, and we'd love to have you back on if you're show us some awesome things you're building in the future. Especially with your agents and stuff like that. That'll be really fun. Perfect. Well, again, thank you, man. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to drop off as you've probably got a busy day ahead of you, but I will finish up wrapping this session up. But again, thanks, Ryan.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody.
See you, man. All right. Again, I want to give Ryan's CDO School a shout out. If you are interested in a one-day workshop that Ryan runs, head to claude.thecdoschool, thecdo.school, or you can scan this QR code. He's just did one yesterday, so you're going to have to wait a couple of weeks, but that will probably give you enough time to get your Claude populated, or think about what you want your agent to do, or what skills you want to build, what are the repetitive things, so you can take it into the workshop, be like, okay, I have a goal of what I'm doing. Again, claude.thecdo.school to check out Ryan's website, all his resources, his courses. They're absolutely amazing. So please go check that out. And before we finish, I want to again shout out our sponsor, which is Dazzle. There's 1 million designers out there. The question is, what makes you unique? Is it delivering wireframes, static mockups, a Figma file to devs and be done with it? Probably not. Imagine if you could just show your ideas instead of just talking about them. That's your unfair advantage with AI. Watch this. I need to improve this feature. I drop in a screenshot of the idea. Dazzle then turns it into a working prototype. Live, real code. I edit visually, layout, flow, logic right on the canvas. It's editing the code on the web. So if requirement changes, I'm not redesigning or rebuilding, I'm just iterating. Think about the ability to close the gap and speak to PMs or devs. You can interact with it. It's usable. PMs can show customers, devs can play with the code. This isn't a facade, it's prototyping for real. And this is how modern product teams work. So next time someone asks you what makes you unique, tell them you have... That's right. That's Dazzle, prototyping superpowers. You can head to this QR code or this QR code and try it, or head to dazzle.dev. And thank you again for sponsoring this episode of the live stream. Don't stick to the old design process and deliver static outputs like wireframes, mockups, and start building the way modern teams build. A process that has real working prototypes, one that has real code, and one that's extremely easy to align on. Hits all three spots. If you want to try Dazzle again, scan the QR codes or go to dazzle.dev, and you can start literally by dropping in a screenshot and describing your idea as I showed you in the video. And I'll be putting a video together on this, like a more of a deep dive on what I'm building and how I'm building it. And so you can see like the magic actually happens. So watch out for that. Before we sign off, I do want to talk about our next live stream, which is on April the 1st. No joke there. How to design you. Okay, I found a typo. Okay, here we go. Let me fix that typo live, as it is a live stream. How to design your career like a product. And we are speaking to Ryan Liu, staff product designer previously at Shopify, Webflow, and Amplitude. She has just a wealth of experience of thinking about her career like a product, and actually how to purposely design what she's doing and her next level. And we'll be speaking to actually a bunch of designers out there. So for juniors, it's how to sort of get past and the struggles of the job market today. For mid-levels, it's folks wanting to amplify their impact. And for seniors, is to step up and lead a team. So we're going to be touching on, a bunch of levels wherever you are in your career. So like Krish in the chat, who spammed it like crazy earlier, and I was just trying to shut it down. But if you're listening, that would probably be a great conversation for you, because we're specifically addressing juniors who are struggling with the job market, with experience, with portfolio, all that stuff. So if you're like Krish, or if you're a junior, mid-level, senior, we have something for you all. So to listen to that conversation, again, the QR code is here, or the QR code's there, or you can head to live.uxplaybook.org to get notified for future events. You can also get that recap of today's event, and the transcript if you prefer just to read it. What are the highlights that Ryan said in that newsletter as well. Again, these conversations are recorded. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. You can head to YouTube for better streams in the future, but also a replay of this. Again, just search Chris from UX Playbook. But until next time, I'm going to do this again. Bye. This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.
This is the design of everyday people.
It sound right, boy.